On that note, we should get to our first issue, which is issue one, Trump and Kenosha.
I think the press is actually, the media is what's fueling this, more so than even Biden, because Biden doesn't know he's alive.
Visiting Kenosha, Wisconsin this week, President Trump doubled down on two of his central re-election narratives, that it is the Trump campaign against the media elite, and that Trump alone can deliver security to American streets. Joe Biden, the president says, will only deliver more chaos. Unsurprisingly, the Democratic presidential nominee disagrees. He says that Mr. Trump is stoking a toxic anger and fueling disorder. But having played down rioting over recent months, Biden this week took a tougher stance against criminal violence. Pat, do you think the growing disorder is really giving President Trump a lifeline back into this race, at least in terms of the polls?
I think I would certainly say yes, but let me say this about Trump's trip to Kenosha. It was bold, it was risky, it was defiant, and it was successful. What he said, in effect, was, I'm not going to be intimidated by mobs, and I don't care what the governor and mayor say, I'm going in there. So that was very helpful to him. He elevated the issue of riots and law and order to the primary issue. He takes a hard line on that, and that's successful. Democrats, I think, are on the defensive. And again, Biden is out of the basement, and clearly this is an achievement. I think I talked about it about a couple of weeks ago or last week, that this was the thing that was going to drive Biden out, and he's done it. So I think Trump is driving the issue right now. And the key issue as of now is the riots and disorder, Kenosha, Seattle, Portland.
Eleanor, your thoughts?
Biden successfully turned the tables on the president on this particular issue by basically challenging the president to condemn all violence from all sides. The president compares the shooting of a black man in the back 7 times by a cop to a golfer choking on the golf course. And he is praising the 17-year-old self-styled vigilante who killed 2 people and injured a 3rd. So the president hasn't said anything about violence when it's perpetrated by his allies, including a caravan of Trump allies who went into the city of Kenosha and fired paintballs, or was it Portland? I frankly confused the two. So we've come out of the conventions. The polls show that neither candidate got a bump, and the president is trying very hard to focus on violence in the streets, hoping to scare white suburbia. But you know, white suburbia cares about COVID because their kids are going back to school, and they're worried about the economy because a lot of people have lost their jobs. Trump carried white America by 20 points in 2016. He's got a lead now of 9 points. I don't think you can scare people to get back the voters that he's lost.
Kerry, one of the things we saw on Wednesday was Joe Biden calling for prosecutions of the police officers who shot Jacob Blake. Do you think that will be helpful to the Biden campaign, or do you think that it might play to President Trump's hand that the Democratic Party has moved to the left in politicizing playing against police officers, as President Trump would present?
I don't think that it will necessarily help the Biden campaign because this particular case is still under investigation. We still don't have all the details. And right now, the Biden campaign is trying to sort of split the baby here and trying to get people to understand that they are for law and order, while also saying that they are also trying to say that they are not for police brutality, at the same time trying to get that BLM support. But at the same time, BLM is also losing support drastically by the polls. So one of the hardest things is that while you have the Biden campaign saying that Donald Trump is not a leader, what's happening? He's following him all over the place, particularly to Kenosha. Right after he said that he wouldn't go to Kenosha, when Donald Trump went to Kenosha himself. So he's particularly following Donald Trump's steps. He's letting Donald Trump dictate his own campaign.
Clarence, do you think that President Trump is playing a dangerous game here, in the sense that as much as people may be increasingly concerned about security, President Trump is not using the language of conciliation. He is doubling down on those harder-edged tones.
Well, President Trump is indeed driving this story because he is the one who has been using urban violence as a distraction from the coronavirus crisis, which he's doing very poorly in the polls when it comes to rating his response to that. And he's tried a number of things against Joe Biden, calling him socialist, et cetera, et cetera. He finally found a sticky issue here because the rioters and looters in Portland in particular haven't let up. And so a problem broke out in Wisconsin, which was unrelated, but nevertheless, just the fact that they had a riot up there, this enabled Trump to go and turn and say, there, you see these Democrat-run cities, Democrat-run states, crime is running rampant. Crime is not running rampant. And by the way, he doesn't talk about the Republican cities like well, I could name several that where crime has gone up here in the past year, but he doesn't talk about them. In other words, he's trying to link Democrats to crime. At the same time, he's not showing a respect for order by saying, well, the governor and the mayor don't want me to come in there, but I'm coming in anyway. Now, that kind of disobedience, I don't know how you square those two messages, but he's Donald Trump.
All right, so let's do one more round robin, and then we'll go on to the next issue. Pat.
Look, Joe Biden looks like a 98-pound weakling here. I mean, Trump drove him out to Pittsburgh, forced him out of his basement. Now he's going to go to Wisconsin. Now he's denouncing violence and all the rest of it. And Kerry is correct. Biden's got a terrible problem here. He's got the AOC, BLM folks who are on one side who believe what they're doing is a great moral cause. And on the other side, he's got what you can call the Scranton Democrats, the Pennsylvania working class he came from. These two have dramatically different views. The American people, and they don't want the President of the United States coming out and visiting with some lawyer in Des Moines. What they want is action to deal with the riots and disorders that have been going on almost 100 days now. They've had enough of it. And again, Joe Biden testifies to the truth of that by his own behavior.
Okay, 3 minutes left. Eleanor.
Pat is drawing lines that don't exist. AOC and BLM do not favor violence. Nobody favors violence. The law and order theme is basically cover for authoritarian action, and it's Donald Trump's effort to distract from the fact that 1,000 Americans die every day. We're in a couple of weeks going to hit 200,000 lives lost. All those people that Pat thinks are sitting around worrying about Attorney Crump and what's going on in these other cities, they're worrying about their kids going to school, and they're not going to be so foolish as to believe that the violence is coming to the city near them. This is Charlottesville all over again. There are good people on both sides. A president fanning the flames of unrest from the Oval Office because he thinks it's his ticket to re-election.
Kerry.
I'm sorry, Eleanor, but the New York Times itself said that Wisconsin voters were already being swayed by what they were seeing over in Kenosha. And Clarence, look, what we're seeing in these Democratic-run cities are these huge spikes in crime. New York City is a perfect example.
And Republican cities.
Specifically, overwhelmingly Democratic-run cities. New York City,
because they're overwhelmingly Democratic. Most of the cities are Democratic. I mean, that's
New York City,
circular.
Chicago, which you know very well, Los Angeles. All right.
Yes.
All right. We're also seeing specifically huge spikes in crime. And what are they doing? They are defunding these police departments where they want to reimagine. Yes, they are. Okay, they want
Minneapolis
to remove.
Did. That's all. Chicago is raising its police budget if we can, and so are a number of other cities.
Where they want to reimagine police, and where they want to, or rather, reimagine policing, or they want to actually take the money and move it someplace else, and they can say, well, we're not actually defunding police, we're actually just moving it someplace else. So that's not actually defunding. So they can use semantics and say that they're not defunding it, but they actually are. It's the same thing. And now what we're seeing in New York is we're seeing attempted rapes over in the subway. We're seeing shootings through the roof. I mean, what we're seeing are huge crime spikes. And yes, people in the suburbs are scared. People in the cities are scared.
All right, Clarence, final word, sir.
Well, I don't want to get into a lot of detail on this, but check out Camden, New Jersey. They did defund their police a few years back, and the crime rate went down because the state took over those functions. But that's not what that movement is about. They're talking about not reducing law enforcement. They're talking about increasing the social services because cops are called too often to stop. Most of them are domestic calls that they're not equipped to really handle. And there are ways to make policing more efficient. But it's hard, it's almost impossible to have an intelligent discussion about law enforcement in an election year, especially a heavy campaign year with a president like Trump who's trying to use crime to dodge the central issue right now, which is the pandemic. So we will continue. Our talks will continue.
Well said, Clarence, and I'm sure we will come back to this important issue.